Welcome everyone, Niall McGorn here from Lady Centre Mullingar, and I'm delighted to be in a place called Thurles in Tipperary, and I'm here with Conor Molony. I would have first met Conor over 3 years ago. Conor's currently milking 170 cows on his 2 Lely A5s. He's one of the first guys in Ireland to go with the new model Lely A5 and getting on quite well. But the first question I might ask you, Conor, what prompted you to go down to look into the robotic milking route? What was the start of your journey?
Start of my journey was, well, I suppose I had seen it publicised down through the different years, and I always had an interest in it. The whole idea of, I suppose, cows milking themselves intrigued me. Yeah. And I would have, I suppose, followed a certain amount of it online and gone to a few open days, and, you know, just, yeah, the idea appealed to me. But never kind of thought I'd do it to a certain extent.
You were still thinking parlour when you went looking? It was just
well, no, we had built a new parlour, or installed a new parlour in 2007.
Okay.
We had a 20-unit parlour with cluster movers. And
okay.
So
your parlour was still relatively fresh?
It was, yeah. The trigger that pushed us was, I suppose, health issues for myself. I have arthritis in my hands, and I found it hard milking, and I suppose it was getting harder to kind of source good labour. You know, it was becoming an issue.
Okay.
So I suppose for the sustainability of the business going forward, we kind of had to look at insulating ourselves, that should anything happen to any of us, that the business could still perform without, I suppose, outside labour to a certain extent, and make it easily managed.
So you're trying to future-proof the business?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah. We were kind of looking at it, and also to make it attractive to the next generation coming on.
Yeah. And your son Niall is now involved in the business?
Yeah, he's back at home since last February, 12 months. Okay. It's only a year and a half now after finishing in college. He's keen, he's an interest in it, and he's keen, and he's willing to drive it on, you know, a bit further. So, you know, I'm delighted that he's willing to do it and has the interest, and, you know, like that's what it's all, that's why we all, you know, put in the effort and the work. Yeah. It's, you know, it's all in vain if the next generation don't want to take it on. And
succession is a big issue in Irish farms.
It is, yeah. I suppose, listen, there's far more options out there for younger people coming up now, and it has to be attractive to them. And like the lads are involved, they play a bit of sport and hurling and football, and, you know, training and matches don't always fit in with milking cows. So at least now they can go to matches or go training. And like I remember before now, when we had the parlour, if the lads had a match there at 5 o'clock in the evening or 5:30 in the evening, we'd bring in the cows there maybe at 2:15. And, you know, you had 180 or 90 cows milked. But by the time the lads got to the matches, they were ready to drop dead. Yeah. They had a day's work done, and, you know, the other lads were all rocking up and as fresh as daisies. But even at playing at club level, like, it has its demands, and, you know, it's nice for lads to be able to do that without, you know, work impinging on what they want to do. Or, you know, it makes it attractive then, because you'd be afraid that lads would turn sour and, you know, resent work to a certain extent. Like, if you can get a work-life balance, it's very important.
Let's look, and I know this shed we're in here, I think it's 45 foot by 38 foot. You built this to house the 2 robots, and you converted your 20-unit parlour area into a calf shed, I think. Calving shed. A calving area, okay. Yeah. Had you much else to do to set up the farm for your 2 Lely astronauts?
Not really, no. Just install a few roadways to split, we'll say, the B block, and just to give more access. But it would have been beneficial anyway to give access to paddocks, but we did have to install just a 6-foot wide roadway into the B block. Okay. It was the best thing we ever did, I suppose. And we installed a tank, all right, on where the grazeway went. Okay. Just to keep it clean and to make it easy to, you know, to wash it down or whatever.
So your main driver 3 years ago was labour. Future-proof the farm, make it a bit easier to keep on top of things. Yeah. 3 years down the line, what's your experience been? Has that actually happened?
It has, yeah. I think it's a more attractive place to work in anyway. Yeah. We're still busy, there's still plenty to do, but it's easier to manage it, and it's easier. It gives us far more flexibility. Yeah. You know, we can go off farm if we have to or want to, without, you know, and the cows will milk themselves.
Like we have here behind you.
Yeah, you know, they tip in and milk away, and no, the system is busy here. We're pushing it.
You will be pushing it, yeah. We wouldn't be recommending 170 cows. You know, it's not everyone who can handle that, but we'll talk about that later on. 170 cows and 2 robots.
Yeah, it works. It's extremely busy at peak, and like you have to be on top of your game for that, because nothing can go wrong or needs to go wrong. Now the biggest problems we'd find is that, let's say, if wires, you know, if cows broke out of a paddock or a block and didn't come, you'd pay a price for it. But then we're willing to accept that. Now we make sure all wires are working, you know, that we're just focused on that end of things. And we're kind of proactive that, you know, we check the cord cups there, or on the robots regularly as well, just to make sure that they wouldn't break, or, you know, it's just maintenance now. You know. But
you always would have had a bit of attention to detail. You can see from the place it's always very clean. So you're kind of that type of person anyway, keeping on top of that.
Well, we try anyway. Yeah, it's listen. It has to be. If you do a small bit every day, it's easier to keep it clean than let it get dirty and then try and clean it. And
talk me through your routine. So I can imagine when you had your 20 unit parlour, you got up, you went down, you brought in the cows, you milked the cows, you washed down your parlour. What's your routine, say, on an average day? What's your routine now, and how does it compare to what you used to do?
Well, I suppose the first thing we do is we'd get up and we'd probably check the cameras to see. We have 2 cameras here in the shed that are faced on the robots. And I suppose last thing at night and first thing in the morning, we check the cameras to see if there's cows in the yard. And if there's cows at the robots and cows in the robots, we'd probably have our breakfast. And then come down to the yard.
And are you getting up around the same time?
No, we'd be getting up later. We were starting, I suppose, at 5:30, 5:45 with the conventional parlour. Probably don't get up now till 7:30 or 7:45.
Same on you.
So I don't feel guilty about it at all, to be honest about it. I gave long enough doing it. It depends now. Listen, if we have something on or the day is busy, we'd get going earlier and get cracking. Come down in, I suppose, and change the milk filters and do a bit of washing out. There's a wash goes on at 8 o'clock in the morning, so, you know, we might come and wash down the robots.
So how long does that take? You get up and you're getting a better night's sleep, a longer night's sleep. You're getting up, you're checking the cameras to see if everything look okay. You're having your breakfast. Then you're coming down. What does that routine around changing the milk filter and washing on the robots, how long does that take?
Sure, you give a half an hour at it, 20 minutes to half an hour, depends. Yeah, you'd have to, that's...
And then out to move?
You move the wires, sure, yeah, we generally, the B wire has to be moved before 10 o'clock. More often than not, there's nothing left in that paddock. There might be 1 or 2, it depends. So we'd go down there and we'd move. If there's a cow or 2 in the paddock, you just push them onto the roadway, and they're generally in the yard before you have the wires changed. You put up the wire for that, and we might move the C pad. It depends on the way C are moving. We might change the wire at that stage too for C. We would have a few lamb cows, so they'd go to C the whole time. So you generally give them a fresh break so that they'd have 8 or 10 hours grass ahead of the main herd coming in, that they're not under pressure.
Can you quantify the labour saving on your farm and your system? Because 170 cows is a busy farm anyway, right? But compared to what you were doing with your 20 unit parlour to what you're doing now, are you say what amount of time are you saving?
With the conventional parlour, there was 2 full-time labour units involved. Well, say myself and a full-time labour unit. And being honest about it, I suppose the 2 of us were busy, or that we were fairly flat out with it. A lot of time was spent. Like, it could take the furthest distance here in the farm. It used to take 3/4 of an hour to get the cows from the furthest distance into the yard. And then you'd start milking. If there was only 1 here, you'd have to wait and start milking then when you'd come in. If there was 2 here, the first guy, you'd be started milking, and until when the first of the cows would hit the yard, and you'd milk there in probably an hour, thereabouts. Then it could take another 3/4 of an hour to wash out the yards afterwards and clean out and wash up, and so a bit of time went. If you take the half an hour, 3/4 an hour to bring in the cows, another half an hour, that's 2 hours, and the hour milking. So like twice a day, that's half a day's work, like just milking alone. We're still putting a lot of time in on the farm, but like it's how busy you are. You have the flexibility, you can go anytime you like. You know,
is that your favourite part of the whole system, the flexibility?
It is, yeah. Like I know the last day, you know, or the last time there was a ploughing match on there, we came to the yard here at I suppose, early in the morning. We had our few jobs done. The wires were set up from the day before. We just changed the filters and washed up. We were gone out of here at 7:30 on our way to the ploughing match. We didn't leave the ploughing site till probably 7 or 8 o'clock at night. We stopped for a bite to eat on the way home, and we're back at probably around 10:30, 11 o'clock. And all we had to do was come down and, you know, wash down the robots, change the filters, and just switch the gates. We had them set up on A's, so all we had to do was close one wire and open the other wire, and you know, it was nice to be able to do that. Yeah, you'd see a lot of other dairy farmers come 2:30, 3 o'clock. They were all rushing out to the ploughing match to go home to milk. But I found that though, even going around, you know, looking at robotic farms before we made the decision to go, and like we had the conventional power at home, and you'd be kind of conscious of getting back to milk. But like all the robotic farmers were very relaxed, and they had time to talk to you, and you know, they were in no rush anywhere. That's one thing that struck me, and just said it's, you know, it's great. And then even driving home, you'd see guys bringing in their cows at various different times, and you can say, just wouldn't it be grand to have the cows milking away themselves? And I stayed at home here in 1982 after Ag College. So I'm milking cows ever since in the power. So time to get out of it.
What else do you like about the system? I know at the time, the flexibility, you said you probably...
Flexibility is a big issue. I suppose the information and the ease of... like, it's a kind of a management tool as well. You know, I like the heat detection on it very much. We don't do heat detection anymore. We leave it to the system. We trust the system. We don't do any tail paint. We don't do any manual observation, any of that. So we rely totally on the collar.
So what does it mean? Apart from the labour saving of not... say tail painting and manual observations, you're saying you've automated the heat detection. What has that meant for submission rates?
It takes a lot of work out of it. It's hard. Our submission rates are good, you know, especially for the first kind of 4 or 5 weeks. We really focused on it. So like our submission rates would be, I suppose, 80–85% there in the first 3 weeks.
Very good.
And we'd still be at that level. But it's not as crucial now, because we don't, you know, if a cow slips a little bit, it doesn't matter. We don't stop the robots anymore.
Okay, you milk straight through.
We'd milk straight through.
So many were you milking Christmas Day last year?
There was around 40 cows.
40, okay.
Yeah, 35 or 40. We'd milk any of the empty cows through.
Okay.
And we'd feed those well in the robots while they're milking. And then when we need collars, we'd cull them at that stage. Yeah.
I remember when we did the deal, and we supplied Conor with 180 heat detection and health monitoring collars, reluctantly. But Conor promised me, he said, that's fine, Niall, I'm going to use the information on the robot, butterfat, protein, the cell counter, and I'm going to pull back my numbers, if my memory is correct, to about 140, but I want to run the cows through for a month or two just to see what they're like. So it made sense. Okay, you'd have a full milk recording every day from the Lely A5, you'd have your butterfat, protein, your cell count, and then you're going to decide what cows you didn't want to be as part of the future of the herd, and you'd settle at 140, and it'd be nice and steady, and everyone would be happy. Yet I look in last year, the year before, you have 180 cows, I think, or 178 cows. So what happened there?
We just found we could work the system. The robots were able to... You see, we don't have a high yielding cow. We don't...
high solids.
We have high solids. Yeah. We don't peak that high, probably 27 and a half litres would be our peak.
Okay.
So once we're able to kind of manage it at peak, it's busy for kind of 5 or 6 weeks at peak. You know, free time is you're down into kind of 3, 4, 5%. Yeah. But we'd focus on just making sure everything goes right at that stage. But after that, then we can relax, and you know, things can run away, you know, the finest themselves after that. What we found when we were able to handle the numbers, I know you were probably apprehensive, like when we were changing over to a new system. And we had to learn a new system, and the cows had to learn the system. That you know, it could have been a disaster. And I suppose you didn't want that. But I was willing to take the risk. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of had faith in my own ability to manage, and
you would have worked closely with your farm management support advisor on tweaking the system, I'm assuming. Yes. Looking at milk access and milking frequencies and all that type of stuff to help you kind of push the boundaries.
Yeah. We would have tweaked a few things on the robots just to make them more efficient.
Yeah. We're dealing with over 400 robots, so over the last 9 years that we're in business, like, we've learned a lot from people like yourself and how maybe set it up slightly differently to help the client maybe achieve more from the system. So, but you also have as well, Conor, you have a buffer tank.
Yes.
So the way that works is when the milkman is lifting the milk, the robots are able to continue milking because there's I think it's a 500 litre buffer tank. Well, what happens is milk has been lifted, or the milk tank is being washed. The robots then fill the secondary tank. That's right. So that the robots are never idle, apart from when they're doing their own wash. So you're probably gaining yourself 50 minutes every second day there as well.
Well, you are, yeah, because our tank, the wash cycle, it's down for an hour and a half, really? From start to finish. Okay. Right. Now maybe it could have been shortened, but there was no need to shorten it with the buffer tank being there.
So without the buffer tank, it means the robots would have been down for an hour and a half, which would definitely affect the number of cows you could milk. Yeah. What would your TBCs be like typically in cell counts?
We're averaging around 7,000–8,000 a month on the TBCs, and cell count are anywhere between I suppose 80 and 100,000. We had a good cell count before we started anyway. Okay. Now we would be using less antibiotics for treating cows. Yeah. We picked them up earlier with the kind of the conductivity and the cell count tester on it. Yeah. So you wouldn't have as much mastitis. Because the conductivity, there's no hard and fast rules about conductivity. It varies from cow to cow. Right, yeah. Like you could have a cow there with a conductivity of 69 in all 4 quarters, which is normal for her. Yeah. And then you could have another cow of 77 or 78 in all 4 quarters, and it's normal for her. But like the cow with 69, if she had a conductivity of 73 or 4, she could have mastitis.
So your point is you can't depend on
conductivity alone.
Yeah. So the mastitis detection system isn't sufficient to tell you with a cow with a high cell count. No. And you could actually have cows with high cell count show no signs of mastitis. So that's the reason Lely developed the cell counter, because now you have a cell count for every cow if you want every milking. Yeah. And then if you see figures going the wrong way, it's very easy for you to pick out the lady that's the problem. That's it. Yeah. And with the blanket treatment, the dry cows no longer going to be allowed at some point in the future. Selective dry cow treatment will be an option.
Well, we use selective dry cow treatment on, let's say, 2/3 of the herd, at least 2/3 of the herd this year.
What's your experience been?
Very positive. Yeah, I wouldn't have any fear of using it. But then we had great information because we were able to go back and pull the cell counts for the year, for the whole lactation. And we sorted it on the highest cell count first. So like all the high cell counts for that lactation popped up in the columns when we sorted it. And then we decided whether we'd go with total sealer only, or maybe only what we would have done was put a dry cow tube in the particular quarter that was giving trouble. Okay. It allowed us that option as well. Okay. You found a quarter that will say if she had 3 or 4 high cell counts in a particular quarter, you treated that with the antibiotic tube, and the other 3 quarters only got teat sealer only. It worked quite well.
So you're a bit ahead of the curve. So you're doing now what you're going to have to do in the future anyway.
Yeah, well, it makes it easier to, it enables us to make those decisions. Yes. You have all the information at hand, and like at the click of a button, like you can pull up the whole lactation cell counts history, of the cow, and you can make your decisions there and then.
Would you have been able to do this if you're still in the parlour?
No. No, listen, you milk record every 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But like it's only a snapshot is all you're getting. You're getting 1 milking or 2 milkings in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and it's fine. Like we would see from the cell counts, like cows can fluctuate in cell count. Yes. They rise and fall. Yeah. And if you're lucky enough, I suppose, to sample the cows when they're low, you believe that they're healthy and good. And then you could, if you sample them when they're high, you could believe they have a problem when they may not either. Whereas with the daily information, you know, you see what the trend is. You know whether it's...
So you've the option of having a figure every time she's milked.
You have, yeah.
So with all those data points, you have a very accurate picture of reality.
Yeah.
What were you most nervous of before you started?
The level of investment, I suppose. Yeah, sure, listen, it's a big investment you'll make. It would come probably second to a house. You know, apart from that, you wouldn't have too many fears. Just, I suppose, listen, once you get your head around making any decision, like it's like any big decision, you kind of, you know, you have to kind of think it through, and once you get your head around it, and then make your decision and suck it up and go with it. Like, either make it work or you don't. You know, you could, you know, you can overthink it too, and you could get over worried about it and maybe not make it. I always believe you're better off to, you know, maybe regret having done it rather than not having done it. You know, more often than not you'll make it work out, but if you're willing to make it work and determined to make it work.
What was the hardest part of the transition?
I suppose our timing was wrong, but then we needed to be started to draw a grant. I had deferred the grant for 6 months, and you know, it kind of...
When did you actually start up?
The 1st of February, 5th of February.
5th of February, yeah.
Right. So we're kind of smack bang into just the start of calving. So kind of training period went on for a long time.
If you were to do it again, when would you do it?
I'd do it September, October.
September, October.
Yeah. I'd say to anyone, if you can start.
If you're an existing dairy herd.
Yeah, an existing dairy herd starts September, October. You have the cows kind of trained in. You know, because the following spring it was grand. Like once you had the cows calved, you put them through for the first milking and they just disappeared. Whereas we found, like the first year you were chasing cows for a while, you know, there was cows that you got to know very well because they were on your radar every day, that they weren't driving through. And then all of a sudden, after a while, they disappeared off your radar, and you kind of said, geez, I forget about her, what's after happening with her? But you found she was starting to work in the system. But there was a good bit of work in getting them to come and go, you know, drive on. And now the heifers were fine. They took to it extremely well.
We would agree with you on that. We would do a lot of installs of existing dairy men August, September, October, even into November. That means this when they come around to calving in February, everything's trained bar the heifers, and the men are trained and the cows are trained, and it's such a much easier transition. So like you're always urging people, and a lot of, if you're an existing dairy farm, you generally don't have as much of a build to do. So you can turn around the project fairly quickly if needs be.
Now, one thing I suppose that we did learn, and we probably learned the hard way, that we hadn't our infrastructure in place out in the fields, because I suppose our build, well, a lot of it was done with direct labour, so a lot of time was taken up focusing on getting the infrastructure here ready for the robots. But like we hadn't the B roadway in, and we found we were only making the B roadway as the cows were coming across the field. You know, they needed the next paddock, and it had to be done. You know, so that put pressure on the system. And then trying to, you know, learn the allocation of grass, get that up and running right, get your head around it. But it's hard to kind of pick up that until you actually work through it. But I suppose it's very kind of gratifying then when you'd see the cows moving and you'd see them passing each other on the roadways.
When it all eventually clicks.
When it clicks together, it's fascinating. Like you could actually give hours watching it, and you know, it is fascinating to see it in motion.
What we do a lot of, and we're doing a lot of at the moment in this time of year, in April, May, June, we do a lot of farm mapping, and we do show the clients where they can put the extra roadways and the drinkers or the fencing or whatever is required, and they could be tipping along getting that done this year, even though the robots mightn't be going till next year. So like we kind of learned that ourselves, so we'll be getting more into encouraging people to do that. Yeah, that's important to kind of have that infrastructure in place, because
it's kind of critical for the system to run smoothly. Like it really can run smooth on the ABC system. Yeah. But like the first year, it took us a good while to get C going even. Yeah. You know, we kind of ran an A-B system, and it was kind of a feast or a famine. Like you'd have cows who come in big groups, and there was a lot of cows around the yard. But when we went to the 3 systems, the 3 different moves, it broke them up and it segregated them out. And
you get a lot more even the movement.
A lot more movement, yeah.
So, hi everyone, my name's Sean Callan. I work with Lely Centre Mullingar as part of the Farm Management Support Team, along with 2 others, Jordan Malloy and Cormac Garvey. So, just out here with Niall Molony. So, Niall, I suppose just give us a bit of a rundown on the herd that's here at the moment. So,
sure, we have 170 cows, as I said. We have a very mixed herd. It's a crossbred herd. The herd originally, 20 years ago maybe, was very much rot bunt based. And there's still a small bit of that there. Obviously then we went a lot more Frisian, and over the last few years then we've been injecting a bit of Jersey and Kiwi cross across the cows, and just we're seeking a high solid cow. Not so much a milky cow, but solids we're chasing, the fat and the protein. So
yeah, high fat and high protein. So I think it was at around 500 or 510 kilos of milk solids last year sold.
That's what we did on average last year, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose the target is to maintain that or slight improvement.
Improve it if you can. We're always looking to improve, I suppose, yeah. We're kind of matching, we're doing a lot of background checking on the cows and pre-allocating the bulls to them. So we'll be looking at the fat and proteins that the cow did for the last 2 or 3 lactations, if they have done 3 or if they've only done 1, and be trying to match a bull for those. And then we'll be also looking at milk speed and trying to give the slower cows bull with faster milk speed and try and improve the next generation.
Very good. And any sex semen been used, Niall, or all conventional?
We use sex semen on any cow that we would keep a replacement from. And we've good conception rates with it now. We've nearly 90 cows served already this year, like, and we've majority of them are sexed semen. Maybe 10 got beef bulls so far. Like we used 90 sex straws last year, and we had 62 pregnancies, so 2 bull calves out of that. It worked well for us last year.
Super results.
Yeah.
And I know the guys were saying inside that we're using it all based off the collars at the moment.
Yeah, that's all. Our heat detection is on the collars. Like we don't use any tail paint, no scratch cards, and we just take them on their word. And they do work well. But even it does pick up cows that if you were watching them you wouldn't notice her. Like I'd see some there that were pulled for bulling, and you know, she'd no marks on her. There's no signs that she was, but yet when you go to handle her, you'd know, you know, she's on, like, yeah.
So I suppose it's all based around grass. We're running an ABC system. So how do you find the high number of cows moving through the system at the moment? Like it's a compact enough block.
Yeah, it was a lot harder to get right initially. I find this year even again it's a lot more easier to manage. Like we do have to supplement maybe at the shoulders of the year. We'd zero graze, or if we ran tight there in June, maybe a bit of a drought or something, we could zero graze outside block in then, and we'd buffer them that way. But
so I suppose on the platform then, roughly how many acres is in this grazing platform at the moment?
There's a small bit over 100 acres on the milking platform altogether.
I suppose, what did you feel for the last, like we're in season 3 with the robots now, for the last 2 years you're running probably some of the highest numbers of cows per robot that's definitely in Ireland anyway, and possibly quite possibly Europe.
It's busy at the peak time of year. Like we had 188 at one stage on the robot last year, in around this time of year. But then a certain amount of those cows were carryovers. They weren't giving you 25 litres a day, they were half it maybe. So, and then you'd be trying to breed for it as well by looking at milk speed and attachment times, that kind of thing, and you'd be watching connections as well to make sure that you're picking up on cows that are, you know, you don't want them failing a couple of times a day and they're taking up time, maybe take up 20 minutes a day just failing. So you want to be picking out those cows and getting right whatever's wrong, be it clipping their udder or, you know.
So like coming from the parlour then, you're talking about milk speed there as certainly one thing we feel is a big limiting factor. You know, we have 24 hours in the day, we have to make best use of it, so milk speed is definitely a big one. Did you find yourselves in the parlour then doing anything before even coming to robots?
I don't think we did a lot because we didn't really have the information there. We have the information now with T4C, but you know, you'd be surprised, you'd see a cow and she'd have a lot of milk, but she could come in and milk off quickly. Or another one could be very milky too, but she takes a long time to let it down, and you'd have her in a parlour and you'd be saying she's a great cow, no, she's giving a lot of milk, but she could be very slow in 1 quarter, like. So it's once you have the information, you can use it. And then every few seconds we get per cow adds up and allows us to milk another couple throughout the day. And it's small margins per cow is what adds up at the end of the day for us.
Yeah, I suppose a good number to start on robots we always found was in around the 70 cow mark. But then the achievable target we always thought was around 2,000 kilos of milk per robot per day. So I think you are doing close to 2,400 kilos of milk per robot per day, which is exceptional. You're certainly in the top 5%. You know, your average farmer achieving 2,000 is quite a good target to hit. I suppose as a new young farmer coming into the industry, I suppose you've milked in a couple of different types of parlours, you're milking with robots for the last 3 years. I suppose you yourself then, what would you feel is the right fit for you going forward? Or?
Well, I enjoy milking with robots. I enjoy the lifestyle benefits that come with it, in that you can be flexible around it. The system will work with you. You know, especially in the summertime of the year, you know, if things going on or you want to go to hurling matches, even going to Dublin for a day to the match, you're not coming down to try and milk in the morning and be ready to go to Dublin at 8:30 in the morning and come back down from Croke Park then, you know, to milk again, which we often did. It nearly puts you off going anywhere if you have to come back and milk again at 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. And it's the lifestyle benefits with the system that make it attractive, I suppose. Like it's not, we didn't install robots and put our feet up and leave the farm. Like, there's still a lot of work, but you can put more time into where it's needed, and you're not given 6, 7 hours a day in a milking parlour and washing around outside it, you know. And it's all the information that comes with it then too. People would often say when you're not seeing your cows every day you wouldn't know them, but I feel we know our cows better now than ever before, with all the information we have on each cow, and that's kind of invaluable really.
So coming from the parlour then, I think you used to dry off for the Christmas period before you started calving again. Yeah. I suppose since you went to robots now, you're not drying off those cows now, you're kind of milking on those late calvers, is that right? That's
right, yeah. We used to close down the parlour there in the middle of December, and it was closed again for 6 or 7 weeks until we start calving then again around the 1st of February again. Yeah, so we're kind of getting that 305 day production now out of all those. Yeah, we milk them on now to kind of, yes, about 60 days before we dried them off, kind of roughly 60 days before they'd calf again. Yeah. So that's why we milk through, we're able to milk through. And I suppose like obviously you didn't milk through the parlour because of labour reasons over the winter on those, and to try and take a break. Take a break, I suppose, was important, to get a bit of downtime ourselves. What has changed now with the robots? Like, obviously there's still cows milking. Well, it allows us, the system allows us to do that, because you know, you can separate out that group of cows and put them through, you know, they'll have access to the robot. Like, if they need to be milked, they'll be milked and they'll be fed. You know, they're on the same diet as the rest of them, then silage, and they can be mixed with dry cows. The dry cows, if they go in, they'll be just chucked out. But we'd eliminate the amount of cows in that yard that have access to the robot at that stage. You're keeping 30, 40 cows milking kind of through the winter or such. Are you finding much of an added workload in those then, as opposed to just having 30 or 40 extra dry cows? No, not really, because they milk away themselves. The robot milks and puts the milk in the tank, and all we have to do is our routine maintenance as regards changing filters and just doing a bit of hosing down around the robot. You know, we still have to clean cubicles. We still lime the cubicles in the dry cow shed, and we lime it in the shed where the milking cows are. So there's no difference in the workload there. Like, they all have to get silage every day, so you're feeding anyway. So the only difference is there's probably 25, 30 or 40 cows being milked through. Now, yeah, you'd probably get down to maybe 20 cows at rock bottom numbers. But then if cows starting to calve in again, you get back up again. Yeah, yeah.
So I suppose you were saying to Niall earlier on, you're doing 2/3 of the cows now with selective dry cow therapy.
That's right, yes.
I know with selective dry cow therapy, procedure is key. How are you doing your dry off procedure at the moment, or how does it differ to what you were doing in the parlour now?
Well, I suppose in the parlour we used to dry maybe in groups of 20 because it was nearly a line of cows. We had a 20 unit parlour, so it was easy kind of dry, you know, groups of 20. We'd dry those after milking in the parlour. Whereas now what we do is we dry them on a daily basis. If there's one cow due to be dried today, she's picked out and she's dried off, and if there's 4 to be dried off, they're dried off. So we're drying cows every day. But like, you know, you'd make sure you'd select them to be routed after milking through the footbath and held in the selection area or in the yard, and you'd put them in then and dry them off after that. Just you'd have to say you dry them after coming through the robot where they're freshly milked and teats are cleaned and disinfected and teat ends are open, and then you'd get them in and you just you clean them again just with methylated spirits. And if she was one for dry cow therapy only or teat sealer only, you'd give her a good cleaning with methylated spirits first and insert the teat sealers, and then we'd use an external T-Hex as well, teat sealer. We started using that there this year, a barrier. Yeah, we found that worked extremely well as well. You know, especially for the ones being dried off and going straight into a shed.
Yeah, I suppose doing small batches then of 1s and 2s every day, you're picking out the cows that need to be done and doing them when they need to be done.
Yeah, it's no big job. Whereas before, yeah, it was a tough job. Like, and it demanded you know, a fair level of concentration and hygiene and.
Yeah, and I suppose just coming back on the point you were saying there with your cows milking through the winter, you mix those cows in with dry cows. I suppose you never had the fear of a dry cow going in and milking. Or how do you manage to stop that from happening? No,
sure, the system won't let them milk. If the cow is on the system that she's dry, she'll go in and the robot will keep chucking her out. She'll just be returned as a refusal.
So you don't have that fear there.
You don't have that fear, and you never have it with antibiotics or freshly calved cows. The only time, like we put the cow through after calving for the first milking and take the colostrum off her, and once she joins the herd, then she just disappears. We never have any worries about her. She's held for the required period of time, and
yeah, so the leg bands and the spray is gone.
That's all gone. Yeah, and the worrying, did it accidentally enter the tank, or, you know, did you break your concentration? And because it could happen. It happened before in the conventional system. You know, we would have always have separated out the antibiotic cows to the end and brought them in last. And just for some reason your concentration could wane or something could happen and you just might forget yourself. You'll go through routine cupping cows and you know, it could enter the line.
Yeah. Takes a split second for it to...
Just takes a split second to break your concentration, or someone could say something to you, or your phone could ring, or, you know, just something can...
Yeah, but that worry is gone off.
It's gone, so yeah. The computer or T4C will hold the cow to the exact minute. Once it's down, you know, it will hold her right out to the very end.
So once you treat an animal, you're telling T4C.
You have to tell T4C. You nearly have to tell her before you treat the animal. But if you do that, I would have no worries that the system would fail.
Thanks very much to Conor and Niall for a really comprehensive insight into how they run their business and their experience of robotic milking over the last 3 years. What we're going to do now is go straight into the live question and answer session. Niall and Conor are going to join us, and we're also going to have Sean Callan and I'll field the questions. So straight into the Q&A. But thank you very much and appreciate your attention.
Niall, I think you're on mute there.
You think after all the virtual open days we've had, I would know better? Good evening, gentlemen. How is all in Tipperary?
Fine, good, yeah.
Still the home of hurling?
Very much so.
Very good. These gentlemen are from Lochmore, which is a very famous hurling area in County Tipperary. So you're very welcome, lads. Farm looked fantastic. A great example of Irish grass-based production. So place is a credit. But you live in a beautiful part of the world. So you probably don't realise that.
Yeah, we do. We appreciate it, okay.
Good, good. Sean, you're very welcome. Sean Callan, Farm Management Support Advisor. So good to have you on board. Guys, I'm going to crack straight into the questions. There's been a fairly comprehensive tour of your farm and what you're doing. So I'm going to move straight on. So one of the first questions came in was from Edward. What times do you have to move the wires for the paddocks A, B and C?
Well, the wires or the brakes change at 10 a.m. is for the B paddock. Cows will go there from 10 until 6 p.m. They go to the C paddock from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. and they go to the A paddock from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. again. So once you haven't changed before that, the routine kind of is to go out in the morning, maybe at around 8:30, 9 o'clock, and we clear B first and move that wire because it's the next break they're going to. And there wouldn't usually be many cows there, so we would clear C then at the same time. And it's just as handy to move that wire and have it done for the day then. Because it can in the evening, if you're doing something throughout the day, you can lose track of time, and it's just nice to have it done before 6 that cows are going out to fresh grass. You don't have to worry about it. And we try to clear the A paddock then around 5 o'clock, maybe 4:30, and the wires moved in at that time again. They don't go out until 2 a.m. as I said, but yeah, they're the times we do that.
So if I understand you right, Niall, you're moving 2 wires in the morning and one in the evening.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and just when you're on that, are you spending more time managing grass than what you did before? More or less or the same?
No, you'd be spending a lot more time managing it compared to before. But you're kind of with the 3 different blocks, like they're A, B and C are at 3 different areas of the farm, really. 3 different corners, you could say. And really every day then you're covering the whole farm in a sense, and you're eyeing up what kind of grass you have around. And every day you're kind of creating a picture in your head of what the next 2.5 weeks grass looks like ahead of the cows in the 3 different blocks.
Okay, so walking the farm every day is giving you a good insight to what's in front of you.
Yeah.
Very good. A question from Brendan. How do the cows react to wet, poor weather conditions? Do they start to hang around the robot area or generally stay out in the field?
Depends really on, I suppose, the time of the year. The fact that they have free choice means that they can come and go, especially if they're out in the early spring and weather turns nasty. They have the option of coming in. We would have the possibility maybe of having a bale of silage in the yard that if weather was bad, that they could come in and they'd have something to eat. But generally you'll find that they'll go back out again. A lot really depends on yeah, they won't, I suppose, listen, if you have driving rain and cold and windy and real miserable winter type weather, they'll come out of it. You'll have the odd few cows will stay out in it. But then once it kind of clears up a bit again, they're back out again, but they have the freedom to move now. I remember before when we had, I suppose, cows locked out in paddocks, you'd have them in a corner and they tried to come out and they couldn't get out. They couldn't get access back to the yard, and they'd have a section of the paddock, especially around the gateways, ploughed. Whereas now they can come and go, and even grazing in I suppose, wetter conditions, it doesn't do as much damage because the cows are going in and out in single file. And we have multiple access points. We have gateways every 25 meters along the roadways. So, you know, we have multiple access points to get cows in and out of paddocks.
It was very interesting there looking at some of the footage recorded there by William Conlon about the lone cow walking along the track and picking her steps and picking her path. So you can kind of see why there would be less damage to ground and less poaching. And maybe a lot of farmers would claim less lameness too, because cows aren't being driven. You're not driving 170 cows down the track. They're picking their path and they're at their own pace.
And they'll move at their own pace, yes. Very much so.
What is the process on farm if the system gives an early indication of mastitis? That's a question from Conor.
First thing we'll do is we'll route the cow, and we'll have a look at we'll go back then and we'll look at her conductivity for the last maybe 2 or 3 milkings and just see what the trend is. If it's rising in a quarter, we'll also look at the cell count recordings for the cow. You might have a rise in conductivity, but like the cell count could still be at a relatively low level. You will find that cows could rise in conductivity for a variety of reasons, be it a stress factor or be it maybe some form of infection or start of an infection. So more often than not, we might rub a bit of other mint ointment into the affected quarter and maybe give it until the next milking to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, if it's a thing that it develops into mastitis, it has to be treated.
Would you be using less antibiotic tubes than what you were on your older system?
Yeah, by a country mile.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're getting the infection an awful lot sooner.
Yeah.
And it's far easier to cure it or clear it up. Yeah, we're kind of more preventing it really than curing it. Whereas in the conventional system, you generally don't find it until it shows up with the cow shows up with milk clots in her milk. And at that stage, she has the infection because the clots are a sign that her own body is trying to fight the infection that's there. So you're only trying to fight a rear guard battle at that stage.
There was actually a question there. I wrote it down here. I'm trying to get questions from the chat and text. And there was a question about is the milk recording a standard feature on the robot? I think the question was, is the cell count, butter, fat and protein a standard feature on the robot? So butter, fat and protein and lactose measurement is a standard feature. Temperature is a standard feature. So the temperature of the cow is actually the temperature of the milk. Mastitis detection is a standard feature because if you're not in the parlour putting on the cups or stripping out the cows, you're not going to know. But the somatic cell counter is an option. That being said, almost everyone goes for it. But what it does is it takes a sample of milk from every cow, mixes it with a small amount of chemical, and then it gives you a figure. I think your cell count is around 100,000 lads, but you probably have a range of cows from 25,000 maybe to 1 million. I don't know, you can comment on that, but the cell counter is an option. But that being said, most people go for it. Mastitis detection, butter, fat, protein, lactose, temperature, that's all standard on the Lely Astronaut. What would the range in cell count be, lads, just when we're on that?
From 13 to about
minute and a half, even some 1 or 2 bad cases, which you try and
get rid of. What do you do with those ladies, lads? Are they just let them run on, or what do you do?
Might dry off the quarter. You'll generally find it's a particular quarter. You might just stop milking that quarter, and you can do that on T4C when you go into our milk settings.
Yeah.
Just tell the computer not to milk that quarter, and just let it dry up. And eventually, she had earmarker for culling or get rid of her.
Using bolus as well.
Okay.
Or any cows that haven't much of a history of high cell count, we use a bolus and an anti-inflammatory drench with it, and that seems to work well on cows with no history of high cell count.
Yeah, boluses seem to be getting popular, Niall. You've good experience with them, have you?
Yeah, it works well with having the cow's cell count on the T4C. We're able to see how the bolus is working once we give it to them, and it does seem to work well on those cows that haven't a bad history. Now, we tried it on some with a history of high cell count, and it didn't really improve their case, but it does work well on the rest. And like you're not withholding milk then from the tank, which is the biggest benefit of it.
Okay, very good. Mindy asked the question, what bull do you have? But you're predominantly AI, aren't you? And then
we've no bull. We had 3 bulls up to last year. And last year we went to 100% AI with the system. And we're the same this year. We're 100% AI. We're just not going to run the bull anymore.
Okay, very good. Nigel asked a question around moving fences and gaps. With that covered. John, there's a question. What you do if a cow is drafted late at night for AI? Does she sit in the drafting area till morning?
We have in our drafting area at the moment, we're drafting for AI. So we have a couple of cubicles open there, and we throw out silage at the feed barrier beside it, and they have a wash truck as well. So if there's a cow drafted out for a few hours during the night, they're well looked after. They're in the drafting area. We're not too concerned about them, and we're able to. They're at our hand then in the morning to AI.
Very good. That was all part of the plan. There's a question here.
Just to follow on from that, Niall, as well, just for other farmers that are, drafting cows out for AI at night, some farmers are drafting cows out to an individual paddock outside, so as well overnight, so they're not on concrete overnight. Depends on what's suitable, I suppose, when one of the yard designers goes into the yard, see what's available, what can be worked out. But some farmers are drafting those just to a paddock overnight, and then you can pull those cows in off the paddock first thing in the morning, so they're not sitting around, or you're not maybe having to feed silage during the summer.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for that, Sean. A question here: did you keep the parlour as a fallback?
No.
How long were the robots in before the parlour went? Because it was a fairly fresh. It was a 20-unit parlour, I think 2007. So it was what, 15 years old or something like that.
The parlour went within 4 or 5 months.
Within 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Okay, no bother.
I contemplated using it the first night.
Did you? Yeah, well,
after that we didn't, and we're glad we didn't.
Did I not give you a bottle of whiskey for the first week? No?
I don't drink, you see.
You don't drink? Okay. Well, I wouldn't start. It's an overrated pastime. When you talked about tweaking the system, you talked about milk access. What is that? Sean, you probably should take that, milk access.
So I suppose milk access, just to kind of give a bit of a brief overview on it, is a setting that's in T4C that we use to basically allow cows to enter the robot and milk. So especially in the likes of Conor and Niall's place, we have that milk access fairly well tightened up. We want to try and get as many cows through the system twice a day as possible. Obviously, lads, you probably agree there's some cows down in 1.5 milkings a day, but they're predominantly the lower yielding type cows. So we're trying to ration those milkings out, and it's based on higher milk volume cows are allowed a slight bit more access, but then every cow below a certain yield is allowed a minimum number of milkings in the day. So it's just to more or less make best use of the robot. There is fine tuning that can go on to try and squeeze them extra few milkings out of the robots, which I suppose we've done over the last couple of years with Conor and Niall, and they've done a nice bit themselves as well.
But that's a lot of what you do, Sean, around working with the client to fine tune the system.
Yeah, so I suppose myself, Jordan Molony and Conor McGarvey would be out getting these farms up and running, trying to get the best practice set up. Obviously, we're learning every day as much as everybody else. We're finding what's working on some farms, what's not. We have a fairly large base there that we've learned from over the last number of years. So we're getting it improved every year, tweaking those access settings and getting a little bit more milk, or maybe a few extra milkings, or maybe it's a few extra cows out of the robots every day. So we're trying to bring that back, to give it back to the existing farmers as they are.
A question actually coming in there from Kevin. I would generally milk heifers, late calving cows once a day for the first few weeks. Can this still be done on a robot? You want to take that, Sean?
So yeah, and once a day milking for heifers and let's say thin cows. So what we do is we can put them in a restricted milking group. It's not necessarily a once a day group, but we cut their milk access back to less than 2 milkings. What that does then is it allows us to get them fed up to 5-6 kilos a day, depending on what the demand is, but it also limits their output. So they can still move through the system fairly smoothly.
Used it with a good lot of herds this year. Just try and get cows back in condition, get them cycling. Most farmers were using it for 3 to 4 weeks on the cows and then putting them back into the standard group. So it's just a matter of identify the cow and put her on a separate group, and she has a different access table to the rest of the herd. You can keep an eye on her fairly easily, draft her out after 3 or 4 weeks and see how she's going. And if you're happy with condition, put her back into the main group and let her go.
Very good. A question then for the lads is, what do you put the high conception rates with the sexed semen down to?
Timing, really, and the information that we have. The system is able to tell us when the cow came into standing heat. So we generally time our AI anywhere from 14 to 21 hours after the onset of standing heat. Kind of 16 hours is 16, 17 hours is kind of the most opportune time after the onset of standing heat. But it varies. With AI, kind of anywhere from 14 to 21 hours. Depends on, at night time, it depends on you know, with AI, if a cow needed to be AI'd at 11 o'clock at night and she was only 14 hours, you might say, right, we'll leave her alone till maybe 6 or half 6 in the morning, and, you know, we'll shove her out those 5 or 6 hours where our, you know, it's to give us a break, really, that we're not working the whole time. But yeah, listen, it's working. It seems to be working well anyway.
Oh, well done. It's impressive. With your robots under so much pressure with the high number of cows, do you have many breakdowns?
No, not really. No, the biggest problem is I suppose, as Niall said, that a wire mightn't be working, or cows would break into the next paddock and may not come. Then you'll have a backlog. But as regards, you know, listen, the robots are working quite well, but haven't touched wood. Having said that, you could have a breakdown in the morning with no guarantees. It seems reliable. There's a good backup team there. Like this 24-hour on call if we need it. The lads will talk you through any problem that you have. And if a technician needs to come out during the night, they will. But thankfully, we haven't had any breakdowns at peak. No, we were serviced there in the middle of April, just before we were starting to hit peak. So you'd hope that everything should run smoothly. But listen, you're dealing with a machine at the end of the day, and things can go wrong with machinery, and you know, it happens. And listen, if it happens, it happens. We don't get too flustered about it. We just suck it up and work through it. Thankfully, it hasn't happened, and you know, we're still sailing close to the wind.
We actually have we 22 trained engineers now. And we have, I think we have an engineer almost within half an hour, 45 minutes of the majority of our customers. Okay, it wouldn't be that on the extremities of the territory, but in the main, most people, there's an engineer. Look, our engineers are situated near the customers. I know we're called Lely Centre Mullingar, but we've engineers within half an hour, 40 minutes of the lads all over the territory. And we've three lads on call 24/7. Most of the time, an issue can be resolved over the phone. We can log in remotely. We can see what's going on. You can talk Niall or Conor through the problem. But if they look in and they see, okay, the client mightn't be able to resolve that, then there's always someone available to jump in the van. We know what they're doing and get you up and running. So we do obviously focus on keeping downtime to a minimum, because we know how important it is. It's a big focus for our business, and look, I think it's one of the reasons we're growing so well, because we do provide the background and the support. Question here from Peter: are there TAMS grants available for the full of this year, or when is the closing date? You probably availed of a TAMS grant, Conor, did you?
We did, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Were you in a partnership with Niall, or?
No.
No, your own. Okay. Yeah. So the TAMS grant, we're lucky enough. The TAMS grant is still in place. It's been extended. It was due to end last December. It's running at the moment. The next closing date is, I think, the middle of July. It's an excellent scheme. Anyone who's seriously considering milking equipment, and look, it's available for parlours as well. It's an exceptionally good scheme. Anyone looking to invest in their farm,
I strongly urge you to look at it and put in an application, because it's worth at least €32,000 and it may be worth up to 96,000. We're not going to get into it tonight, but if you need more details, contact the office of Mullingar. We'd be delighted to fill you in. And it's not a complicated application. It's relatively straightforward. And it's efficiently run and managed by the department. So, you know, I'd be a big fan of it. It's been a huge help to our business, in fairness. Question, do you think you can get more out of the robots, or is it maxed? Is it maxed at that? So I don't know who wants to take that up.
As it regards numbers, I presume so.
I suppose numbers or milk, I don't know, either are.
There's probably more potential in milk, I would say. No, we milked 188 at peak last year, and we managed it.
I'd like to cut that from the recording, Sean. The people live can listen, but we won't put that out, because that is not something I'd be broadcasting.
There's currently
178
on it, Niall.
178.
Yeah, that's just milking there at the moment.
And if you many left to calve, we're all calved.
Two. No, there's two late heifers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you planning to run 180 this year?
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Yeah. The point is, not everybody can handle that, you know. And there is. So I suppose there's a question, Sean. What determines the number of cows you can put on the robot?
So I suppose I touched on it during the bit on farm. Milk speed is a massive one. But like what comes long before milk speed then is getting the layout right. You know, you need to get the management on the layout right. First of all, if you don't get the cows moving in and out from the grass properly and getting the right grass out to them to get the right flow to and from the robots, you're not going to get a massive output per robot. That's going to limit you massively then on how many cow numbers you can actually put through it. Management then, like the lads are doing, they're keeping the robots tidy, keeping them clean. Like, it's amazing the difference that alone makes, just in terms of keeping the machine right. You know, the last thing anybody wants is to have a phone call, robots are shut down at any hour of the day, especially with that number of cows. Getting the yard layout right, then actually getting the cows to move through the yard. You know, we need to get cows to be able to get free access into the back of the robots, but then when they're milked, we need them to be able to get away from the robots as well. So obviously the more obstacles you put in front of them in that way, the slower those cows are going to be able to move through the system, the less number of cows you're going to get through the robots at the end of the day. But walking down the line, like, there's certainly scope to get more milk out of the robots than what the lads are getting. I'm not going to say I'm going to do it with more cows, but there is scope to get it. You know, I think the High Zealand robot or Lely robot last year, Niall, was somewhere in the 3,000 or 3,200 kilos of milk a day, maybe a little bit more. Not an Irish robot now, but there is following the right management practices and putting the right things in place. And it's amazing how much the small margins add up. I think it was with a farmer the other day, we saved about 15 seconds off each box time. That was working out to about 45 minutes, 50 minutes in the day total. So there's an extra 4 cows in the system, 2 milkings a day. You know, it doesn't be long adding up with the small margins. So
very good. That leads a question from Thomas. How many times a day are the cows milked on average?
We're averaging 2 milkings a day across the whole herd. But having said that, we have a group of cows within the herd that have access to milk up to 3 times a day. Anything doing over 28 litres are in a 3 times a day group. Now, they're not milking. They're not all milking up to 3 times a day. They're averaging around 2.6 milkings a day. And then we would have a group of cows milking, I suppose, 1.5 times a day, which are probably milking every 15 or 16 hours. Now, they're probably lame cows or older cows that don't travel as well, which is fine for those. They have the capacity to carry the volume. Mm-hmm. Listen, you can work them all within the one herd, but you can manage kind of 2 or 3 different herds within the one herd, if you know what I mean.
Very good. Thanks for that. A question from Shane. Where do you treat cows with teat seal? Crush, pit?
We have it's a crush. We have 2 gates in a kind of a triangle leading into the crush, and all we do is we throw a rubber cow mat on the ground and kneel down on it and treat them there. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to do them. We have bars strategically cut out of the centre of the gate at the cow's udder. It gives us unhindered access to the udder, and it's quite easy to do it. But you're only kneeling down for 2 or 3 cows at any one time in the day, and you dry off the cows at a time that suits you. You give her access to milk when you're around, so that she comes out of the robot and that you're ready to dry her off. But it's quite easy to do it. Like, the cows are extremely quiet on the system. We would have noticed that big change in temperament, I suppose, since they went on the robotic system. They've become extremely tame and extremely quiet.
Why do you think that is, Conor?
They don't see us as, I won't say a threat anymore, but they're never hunted anywhere these times. Before you had to, you went out and you rounded them up in the field and you brought them in for milking, and maybe drove them back out again to the paddocks. Whereas now they travel at their own free will. And if we're there doing something around the yard, we're not really focusing on those. You find now that the cows will actually come up and scratch off you. And, they're gone extremely quiet.
Very good. Question here, can you get finance on robots? Yes. All the banks do term loans. There's option of hire purchase, where the robot's only security on the loan. You can get that over 10 years. So it typically works out about €40 a day for one robot, and maybe 65 for 2 after the deposit. What is the lead time for a robot? Look, it's generally 12 weeks. Getting a robot generally isn't an issue. Like, we can get our hands on a robot in 2 weeks if we had to, every now and then. We'd hopefully be better organised and having to do that too often. But the lead time consideration is really getting the yard plan correct, getting the grazing layout set up properly, getting whatever building work is required. We have 2 full-time yard designers, and we have 2 full-time project managers. So getting all that bit coordinated. So once the plan's agreed and the work is done, the install is actually relatively straightforward. I don't know how long the guys were installing your robots, Conor or Niall, but generally we can put in a 2 robot system in 4 days, 3 to 4 days, depending on how many men we put on the job. So I don't know what your experience was.
Yeah, that was about all it took. Yeah, it was quite quick.
Yeah, and like when we're at full throttle in the main part of the season, we'd have many men on site who would move through work fairly quickly. It was interesting, though, what Conor was saying about installing in the back end of the year. If you're an existing dairy farmer and you have the opportunity to be installed in August, September, October, it is a big help. It does make life easier. But obviously some people don't have that luxury. They have to start up in February. Maybe their robots are going in the old parlour area. Obviously, if you're a new entrant, you don't have any choice. But if you have the choice, it is a lot easier doing it in the back end. But not everyone has that luxury, as I said. What else? I'm just looking at questions here that were already asked. There's a question there, I think, from Edward. He asked, what happens if you have too much grass on block A and not enough on block B and C?
We take it out for silage, maybe. You could always zero graze that too, which we have done. If you had extra in A, we'd zero graze it, and if we're short in C, and we would feed it to them then at 6 p.m. to supplement the C block. Yeah, it's easy enough to manage because C is the smallest block on the farm for us anyway. And that is, we'd be on a short rotation there, maybe 16, 17 days at times. So that is where we would run into our shortages, and A and B tend to take off at this time of year. And you can always supplement then from one to the other by means of zero grazing.
Okay, very good. Just let me flick down here.
On that as well, I suppose, depending on the layout of the farm, I suppose when we go out to take a look at it, we do try to, I suppose, walk in the road plan that's going to allow the B block and the C and the A block to, cross paths and maybe share a platform of ground, so you can give and take a little bit, even with grazed grass. Sometimes that might take an extra, 200 or 300 meters of a link-up roadway. but a lot of the time it's well worth doing for the likes of those sort of events. Again, it depends on the farm layout, but we generally try to work that in a grazing layout where we can, so that there is a bit of flexibility between the blocks, that you're not completely confined, that this is all the grass I have in A, all the grass I have in B, and I don't have enough grass in B, but I've silage I need to cut in A. So we try to work that into a plan.
Corey, I'm gonna just take another 2 questions, guys. There's other questions come through, but I think they've been answered before. A question from John: how do you manage cows come a TB test?
It depends on the time of the year. If the TB test comes at winter time when they're indoors, it's very handy. It works extremely well. What we do is if they're on grass and milking, we'll have a TB test now coming up in July as a result of a contiguous test. So what we'll do is we'll probably hold cows. Yeah, we'll generally start testing maybe at 7:30 in the morning. So we'll hold cows in the yard maybe from 5:30 that morning. So any cow that milks from 5:30 will be held, and we'll TB test those, and then let those all off to B block. And then what we do is we'd close the A block, as in that we won't give them access back to the yard. And then what we do then is we'd maybe clear the C block and test those and let them milk away. And then we'd go out, we'd bring in the cows from A block then at that stage, and we'd bring those in and test them. And we'd for that day then we'd give a bigger allocation in the B block, because more cows will be directed towards there. Just takes a little bit of planning and trying to...
Is it a bit of hassle, Conor?
It is, yeah, a small bit of hassle. Now it worked extremely well this year in January. Our annual test came up in January this year, and it worked extremely well because most of the cows were around the yard, and you were able to allow the cows that once the ones that needed to be milking, you allow those out to the yard, the robot area, to be milked, and the rest of them then you were able to kind of work around that TB test, keep TB testing away without interfering with the rest of them. But when they're grazing or later on in the season, it's a bit more complicated. Just have to kind of plan it right, but it can be done.
Very good. Last question. Really impressed with the lads' setup and results. Beautiful looking farm. Can I visit the farm? Long-suffering dairy farmer. In fairness, the lads are good operators. There is no doubt. It is a beautiful farm. Like, you're making cows like full time since 1982, Conor, I think you mentioned. So, right. And it's obvious that you're fairly fine-tune your system and you're well on top of your game, and that man beside you is definitely going to drive it on. I could see that from myself. It's worth going to see, but all I would say is we have, I won't say lots of Molonys, but we've lots of decent farmers, lots of decent operators who've been milking a long time, doing a good job. So if you want to visit a farm, now that things are opening up a bit, that can be arranged. You might necessarily have to go to Tipperary. We have, customers. We're dealing with over 400 robots, so I would be surprised if there's not a farm not a million miles away from you that would be willing to share their story. We're very fortunate that we find that most of our customers are very open. They would have done a lot of homework themselves before they made their decision, and they're generally fairly open to sharing their experience, good and bad, and giving their advice and lessons that they've learned. So anyone who's interested in robotic milking or upgrading their milking system, or maybe going into milk, I always suggest visit a few farms, visit a few setups, get comfortable with the whole idea. And then if you want to explore it a bit more, we'd be delighted to visit your farm, look at your yard, give you some ideas of how it might be planned out. Look at your grazing block, check that for suitability. The likes of Sean here, his full-time role is working with the client, helping to manage the grass, learn from good experience and bad experiences, like he would have learned from the likes of Conor. And please God, I'm sure Conor would have learned a little bit from Sean, and Niall would have in the mix as well. So it's two-way traffic. So and that's the plan. And every year we learn a little bit more, and we try to bring that value to our clients. So lads, I'm going to wrap it up. Really, really appreciate your opening up your farm to us. You're a man of your word, Conor. You said you'd do it a long time ago, and fair play to you. You didn't need to be pushed too hard. Really appreciate it. The farm is a credit. The work you're doing is a credit. And I'm sure you're not finished yet. I know there's ambition there to keep driving the business forward. I want to thank Sean Callan for his contribution and his help and support. I want to thank William Conlon, who recorded all the footage and edited and pulled the whole thing together. And myself and Sean had just come in and take the easy part. So credit to William Conlon, put a lot of effort into behind the scenes to pull this together. And thank you for everyone who's attended. Hopefully we've answered your questions, but if you have any more, we'd be happy to answer us. Get in contact with us, the team in Lely Centre Mullingar, and we'd be delighted to talk to you one-on-one. And if you want to refresh yourself on anything that's been covered, you'll get an email in the next couple of days with a link, and you can watch a recording of the event. So thank you very much, and good night.